When we talk about it from the acupuncture point of view, it actually really works well because you are looking at the vital life force of the body, right? And looking at where the stagnation is or the blockages are. And that's beautiful. I think acupuncture is built on this foundation, and correct me if I'm wrong. With the medical intuitive, I'm also looking for that. And I'm also looking for the origins of it. So it's not just the physical origins, it's the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the life history origins. And yes, it is deeply personal. It is nothing but personal.
I'm Michael Max, and this is Qi207. I was talking with a pal on the other side of the world the other day. I had to go searching for my earbuds. I had to once again go searching for my earbuds, which are usually in one of 4 different places. I commented as I was looking for them how I should always put them in the same place, like I do with my car keys. And then he says, well, my mother used to say, a place for everything and everything in its place, which of course is annoying to hear in the moment when you're looking for something, even if it is true. We worked together on some projects in the year of COVID, and he said it was a good year. He's successfully written and published a book. He's got another one that's in the publishing pipeline, and he's got some outlines for more. He used his time in lockdowns and quarantines to get some useful and creative work done, and in the process, developed a discipline and focus that he previously didn't have. I heard him say that 2020 had been a good year, and it rang true for me as well. It brought a kind of goodness in that while it dramatically impacted my clinical work, at the same time, it opened the opportunity to focus on and improve the podcast. The destruction of my previous routines and how I inhabited the day has shown me where I need more discipline, and the disruption invited me to reconsider the balance, or perhaps more truthfully said, the imbalance in my life. Creative work, study, taking on projects that span months or years, all requires a way of considering how we move through and use time. It's much easier to get through a day when the schedule is set by some outside force, but when we are in charge and responsible for how we use the limited time of each day, it's easier to see where you lack the discipline. And it's easy to slip into the distraction or avoidance around the things that make you uncomfortable. It's hard to feel the progress when the day's work might not see real fruition for months. It requires a capacity to see small steps as progress without falling into the trap of then letting yourself off the hook for the next steps that tomorrow will require. Having the capacity to inhabit the yin-yang of unimpeded rest and focused activity is truly required. To do when it's time to do, and to rest in the moments of restoration and allow them to be separate, like an inhale and an exhale. It doesn't sound that difficult, but you know how difficult it can be. I think my buddy's mom is right. A place for everything and everything in its place. It is as true for car keys, coffee cups, and house slippers as it is for the way that we parse the activity and restoration in our day. One of the malaise of modern life is the invitation to be always on and yet frequently distracted. I'd have to agree with my pal. The year of COVID was helpful in maturing a kind of discipline of mind that I did not realize that I had been lacking. And that time is not something to spend. It's something to use. Sometimes we know, but we don't know how we know. At times, our senses come together in a way that gives a more textured and dimensional glimpse into our patients. These conversations come to you through the generous support of our sponsors and members. Blue Poppy, your new one-stop shop, has speedy shipping options on everything that you need for your clinic. It's Women's Health Month at Mayway Herbs. Check out their new website for learning resources on helping women with herbal medicine. Are you a creature of habit? How about making a change that helps your patients and the planet with AccuFast needles? And later in the show, raising your fees doesn't have to be a difficult process. Jane has helpful suggestions on making it easy and effective. And finally, have you considered that having a thriving profitable practice is one of the most healing things that you can do. Julie Bear Don't Walk has, and she can help you do something about it too. Do be sure to visit the sponsors page on the Qiological website to take advantage of all the special offers our terrific sponsors have for listeners of the podcast. Picture this. Your clinic is buzzing with patients, and then you realize that you're down to your last box of needles. No need for panic, because Blue Poppy, your one-stop shop for all your acupuncture needs, they ship orders received before 3 p.m. on the same day. With a quick visit to Blue Poppy's website, you can order premium needles, herbal formulas, and that special Dr. Bob's oil that your patients love. Blue Poppy understands practitioners can't keep patients waiting. That's why they strive to get you what you need when you need it. From high-quality Chinese herbs and formulations to acupuncture supplies and clinical essentials, Blue Poppy has served practitioners for nearly 40 years with products that meet the highest of standards. Discover everything Blue Poppy has to offer by visiting www.bluepoppy.com, and don't forget to subscribe to their mailing list for exclusive offers and more.
Hi folks, I'm Yvonne Lyle, president of Mayway Herbs. May is Women's Health Month, and as a women-owned and women-run business, we especially love how Chinese medicine can support wellness through every stage of a woman's life. So in this month's newsletter and podcast, we're covering topics like PMS, pregnancy, menopause, and osteoporosis. We'll share expert insights and effective treatment strategies you can put to good use in your clinic. Our Plumflower brand line includes herbal tea pills, tablets, extract granules, and organic herbs, all of which you can find on Mayway.com, and where you can also find articles, videos, and other resources to support your practice. Since 1969, Mayway has been a trusted source for high-quality herbal products. In these challenging times, please know that we remain committed to keeping our products accessible and affordable so you can take care of yourself and your patients. As always, thank you for supporting Real Chinese Medicine.
Daily habits and routines feel comforting, familiar, easy, automatic. That's the power of repetition. You've worked out the kinks and can do it with your eyes closed. But what if you shook things up? What if you ditched the old routine and tried something new? Hi, I'm John Sten. I've practiced acupuncture for over 30 years, and together with my wife Kelly, we created the world's first eco-friendly acupuncture needle. The AcuFast earth-friendly needle system cuts your packaging waste by 60 to 90%, depending upon your needle type, speeds up your needling, gives you more control, and best of all, while you're healing patients, we plant a tree for every 2 boxes your clinic uses. Thousands of acupuncturists have already made the switch. In just the last year, they've helped plant over 16,000 trees. Since we started, that number has grown to over 50,000. So break the routine. Be the change. Visit acufastneedles.com. Your patients and the planet will thank you.
In this conversation with Wendie Colter, we are going to look at some surprising research on how medical intuitives can get a glimpse on what a patient's problem is. Part science, part art, and with some interesting research to back it all up. Let's find out more from Wendie Colter. Wendie Colter, welcome to Qiological.
Thank you, Michael. Glad to be here.
Happy to have you here. Now, generally speaking, I talk to acupuncturists on this podcast. You're not an acupuncturist, but you've been doing some really interesting work with intuition and medical intuition. And I was turned on to some research of yours, and we're going to talk about that a little later in the show. I think it was Richard Hammerschlag
Yeah.
said, hey, check this research out. This is mind-blowing. And it was. It's interesting. And you're one of the researchers.
Yeah.
So I get into that in a moment. But before we do, I'm always so curious to know how people ended up where they did. How did you wind your way into doing the work that you do?
What a nice question. And thank you for having me. That's such a long answer to a short question. Like many people, I was intuitive from a young age. And intuition is not very well understood in our society, and it's not super encouraged either. So I found myself with these sort of interesting intuitive abilities. And it wasn't until later in life, when I began studying energy healing practices, that I realized that my intuition was just growing by leaps and bounds. And as an energy practitioner, I found myself seeing right into the body
Mm.
and also seeing like the anatomy, the physiology, where the issues were. It just showed up in my mind's eye. And that was a sort of a progression over time of playing with the idea of intuition in all ways throughout my life. It was always just an interesting, fun thing. I've got a lot of stories about that, but where it gets really interesting is when I became an energy healer and started or energy healing practice. And what I noticed was that not only could I see the physiology and the anatomy and whatnot, I could also see where the issue began, meaning what were the life circumstances of my client that transformed into an imbalance. And that is one of the basic tenets of medical intuition, that there's this some sort of issue or imbalance or disturbance, something in the energy system that can manifest eventually, potentially, into a physical issue. So there was this very multifaceted view. And I became a trainer of intuitive practices. I became an energy healing instructor. And through all of this, I began to really understand that the medical world was missing this piece. And my clients would tell me over and over again, what you told me in that session, I was able to take to my doctor and we were able to find an answer. And I thought that was the greatest thing ever.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and so it became a mission of mine really to teach this to health practitioners. And so in my work, I teach doctors, certainly a lot of acupuncturists, chiropractors, nurses, on, people that are already working in healthcare that can use these tools and these skills to help their patients and their clients. So it's really a broad range. I answered that the long way, Michael.
Well, this is a long form podcast. And I mean, some answers, they just take time.
Yeah,
I mean, they really do. And I mean, you were just talking about like how illness can arise. Sometimes it takes a long time. Maybe there's an imbalance, something happens, it comes from the outside or it comes from the inside. It disturbs this system in a way. Now things start flowing differently.
correct.
There's accumulations where there shouldn't be accumulations. There's deficiencies
Yes,
where there should be some fullness. When you were talking about how you work and how you see it, I'm thinking, well, that's Chinese medicine, as
exactly.
I understand Chinese medicine. So I want to get more into this, but I've got this burning question because I've heard people often talk about there's something that they had since a child
Yes.
and you get it shut down or you're told it's not true or whatever, but it's loyal, it sticks with you. I'm curious to know that as a child, what did it look like to be intuitive?
What a good question. For me, there are certain skills, intuitive skills, that are inherent and innate. Everybody is intuitive. We all have this ability. When we're children, either it's encouraged or discouraged, and that's putting it nicely. And as we grow up, it's usually discouraged. So people end up walking away from or sublimating or ignoring their intuitive hunches or their intuitive feelings. But when I was a child, I was really blessed to have parents who were tolerant of things like intuition and creativity and stuff like that. So I was never discouraged in my home. I was clairaudient from a young age, meaning I could hear information. And what I was hearing from a young age was music. One of my fondest and earliest memories of this skill was driving in the car with my mother. I was, I think, 6 years old, and I was humming a song in my head, and I asked my mother to turn the radio on because there was a song that was playing that I really liked, and I wanted to hear it, and through the radio. And she turned the radio on, and it was just where I was singing it in my head, and I thought this was normal. This is just what you do.
This is just what you do. Hey, that's fantastic. It's just normal.
It's just normal, and of course, as I grew up, I found out that it wasn't, and I stopped talking about it. That's just one aspect. When I think back, I had a lot of memories about this, and I remember being able to look at people and just know if they were not well. Now, as a kid, I couldn't tell you what was going on with them, but I just knew. That's called claircognizance, by the way. The first one is called clairaudience,
Hmm.
clear hearing. Claircognizance is clear knowing. And clear knowing ends up being what most healthcare practitioners use. In other words, it's a sense of just, I know it, and I don't know how I know it. And we call that a hunch, a gut feeling. And there's actually quite a bit of literature in the scientific community, the medical community, about gut feelings and hunches. It's quite well studied, actually. Um,
I'm surprised to hear that.
well, you won't know it until you look, but it's there.
Yeah, I'm surprised because so many times when I've been to a doctor,
Hmm.
what I hear about is, well, the literature says.
Yeah.
And there's this part of me that is like thirsty for a practitioner to say, well, I've been doing medicine for X amount of years. And what I've seen in my experience is I would so love to hear that. Not that we ignore what's in the literature, but I would love to hear a
Mm.
person speak from that sense of like time in the boat, so to speak.
Yeah. It's interesting. I'm writing a book on this very subject. I'm writing a book on medical intuition. It'll be out next year. And I'm deep into the research. And it's interesting because there is so much research on physicians' gut feelings and intuitions. It's being researched now more than ever, and not just in the US, all over the world. Because when you go to a doctor and they use their gut feelings and hunches, those are the doctors that everybody goes, oh, my doctor's fantastic. Because somehow they just know. And of course, they're going to lean on the literature. Of course, they're going to read up on things. But one of the things that they're finding in all of this research on what's called clinical intuition is that years in the field has generally been the idea of it. Well, if a doctor has, or practitioner, and not just a doctor, certainly an acupuncturist, decades in the field, then they're going to have all this subconscious information to draw on. Well, with medical intuition, it has nothing to do with that. And frankly, they're finding that novice practitioners also can access intuition successfully. Tens of years or whatever in the field to use intuition is actually untrue. And the research that we've been doing with medical intuition really bears that out. When the medical intuitive's information is corroborated through medical means, that's where it gets exciting. That's kind of where the rubber meets the road. Can a medical intuitive do what they're supposed to do, which is see things that they may not have any prior knowledge of and would not have any prior knowledge of?
That's interesting.
Yeah, that's the difference really between medical intuition. It's why non-medical people have traditionally been medical intuitives. That's changing, thank goodness. I think that's a good thing. But I also think that we can't discount the fact that there are so many talented medical intuitives out there. I'll give you some statistics. What we want, and now I can't speak for all medical intuitives, but one of the values of medical intuition is that it is a perfect interface with the medical world. And I mean in complementary alternative, integrative medicine, allopathic medicine. And that is the information from a medical intuitive, anecdotally, over and over for hundreds of years now, has not only been corroborated in medicine, although those reports are not easy to find, they are there, but also it helps the client who is now your patient talk about and understand their issues on a more deeper level. And it helps the physician and the practitioner. So I'm sort of speaking about this in a few different ways, but let me give you this piece of information. This has not been published yet in full, but it's going in my book. We just completed a nationwide survey of medical intuitives, and we asked who they are, what they do, how they work. And 82%, I believe, of the medical intuitives we surveyed work or assist licensed healthcare providers, work with or assist licensed healthcare providers. They're consulted by them. And that was a huge number. We didn't expect to see that high of a number. We also found, and I believe the number is 86%. Don't quote me on this. It's going to be coming out in my book, and I just don't have the numbers in front of me, but high 80% of medical intuitives are referred by licensed healthcare practitioners. And that's what I see in my practice. I get referrals all over the place from doctors and psychologists and people like that who are sending their patients to me for a consultation. So this is not unusual. It's just not talked about, right?
Right. So Wow. I mean, at the moment, just wow.
Yeah.
We have a myth in Chinese medicine. It's an old myth. It's like one of the first practitioners of acupuncture. His name is Bian Chue, and he's actually this like bird-headed humanoid, one of these kind of mythic characters. And he somehow gained the ability to look inside of people's bodies.
No kidding.
I mean, exactly what you're describing is this trait that Bian Chue somehow acquired, being able to see inside the body. Now, he could help people because he could see what the issue was and he could see how you fix that
Yeah.
or how you help that.
Yeah.
And the pulse reading and a number of other things that come out of Chinese medicine, that stuff arose because you can't go around saying, well, I can see that your pancreas has a problem. And here, drink these herbs and that will help. But you could take someone's pulse and go, oh, yeah, your pancreas has a problem. And I mean, it's a lovely mythological story, but as with so many of these stories, of course, it is speaking to something that is in us. And you talk about the ability to be intuitive, a medical intuitive, or even other kinds of intuition for that matter,
Mm-hmm.
as being a part of the human makeup. And I absolutely am in agreement with you on that. I mean, our senses are so interesting because they open up an entire world to us within the spectrum that they can sense.
Mm-hmm.
But the problem at the same time is we are then blinded to everything that falls outside of those sensings.
Explain what you mean by that.
So, for example, I'm looking out my window right now from where I sit. It's a beautiful spring day here. It's been raining. It's super lush and green right now. I mean, all the vegetation is just drinking this in. Gorgeous. And I can see all these colors, and I can see the dogwood flowers are drooping a little bit because they're wet. I mean, I see this world outside of me. I can see a certain wavelength of the electromagnetic spectrum that I call vision, and I can see that world, but I can't see the ultraviolet, and I can't see the infrared. And there's all kinds of other stuff that's out there, but my senses are not capable of picking that up. At least my visual sense isn't. And so this whole world comes into view, but I am effectively blind to everything that falls outside of those wavelengths.
Yeah. Well, you're talking about, I don't really have a good word for it. I'm sure somebody does. They probably do at IONS, Institute of Noetic Sciences, and the places where they study intuitive phenomenon. But this is actually a learned skill. That's how I see it. Some people are naturally intuitive. They naturally pick up on the unseen, the unheard, all of those clairs, we call them. Clair means clear in French. So clairvoyance is visual seeing, clear seeing, clairaudience, clear hearing, claircognizance, clear knowing, and clairsentience, clear feeling. There's several others, but everybody has access to them. Whether or not we choose to develop them is really the question. So in my work, I train people who've never used their visual intuitive sense before, but they might have used their gut feelings or their empathy. That's the clairsentient part, the feeling, emotional feeling part. And they want training in this other skill set so that they can use the ability to see beyond our normal senses. And there's such misunderstanding about this in the world, sadly. What I do is try to help people understand what this is about. And I'm very blessed to speak to healthcare professionals of all kinds at conferences and whatnot. And what's interesting about this, Michael, when you talk about these senses, there are so many ways to correlate it with our normal daily life. We just don't think about it. So here's one example. And certainly society doesn't talk about it this way. But when we talk about visualization and the clairvoyance, we're talking about using the mind's eye. That's it. It's that muscle of, so to speak, of being able to see with your eyes closed something in your mind's eye. It's that simple. So that's the basis of it. Now, if you think about that as a skill that you can develop and expand, then we're talking about the skill of clairvoyance or medical intuitions, medical intuitive seeing, or that wonderful healer that you mentioned from Chinese medicine. It's a skill set. I talk about this as if you were going to learn a new language. That's another way to think about it.
Mhm.
If you were going to learn Italian, you wouldn't expect yourself to know Italian before you learned it. You might pick up a word or two or have a sense about it, But what would you do? You'd go to school, you'd buy a Rosetta Stone or, whatever those things are. You'd buy a program.
You would
You
practice
would
it.
practice it.
You would
Exactly.
listen to it again and again.
Yeah.
You
You
would start to where there previously was, like, sounds that
Mhm.
made no sense, all of a sudden they string together
Mhm.
into a word.
Yeah.
You can recognize, "Oh, these 3 syllables are not separate words, they're one word." These things come into view over time.
Over time and practice, yes. And often you might get a teacher that you like that, resonate with. Same thing with this. You wanna find ways to learn this that are safe and ethical and, help you practice. And all of that is doable. I've taught many, many skeptics who say, "I can't do this," or "I don't even believe in it," and the next thing you know, it takes time. But they're
Mhm.
learning how to develop that muscle, so to speak.
This episode is brought to you by Jane, the clinic management software that honestly just makes running a practice easier. Let's dive into something that's never easy, but sometimes necessary: raising your fees. It can feel awkward, right? But here's a tip that can really help. Consider offering flexibility to your patients as you introduce the change. When patients face new fees, it's natural for them to feel uncertain or concerned. That's where flexibility can really make a difference. Offering options like a phased increase, suggesting a payment plan, or even taking a moment to talk things through can help to ease the transition. These thoughtful gestures show your patients that you're listening and care about them, which strengthens the trust you've worked so hard to build. If you're looking for more ideas on how to navigate these kinds of changes, head to frontdesk.jane.app and check out the article, How to Tell Clients You're Raising Your Fees. One last thing, if you're ready to give Jane a try, you can use the code QIOLOGICAL for a 1-month grace period on your new Jane account. Great. I'm always curious about, so much stuff. And we're not here to get a lesson. I mean, we're here to talk about lots of other things around this. But I'm wondering if you could share with us something for anyone who's listening right now, like a first step. Like, how can we begin to tune our, let's say, vision, for example, because it sounds like there's different senses that we could work with. How can we begin to tune our vision or just begin to notice what's present, but we're not paying attention to it?
Yeah, that's a great question. One of the things I suggest if people want to practice the visual sense is guided imagery is really, really helpful. Guided imagery, mind's eye exercises, all of those are terrific for working that muscle of internal visual seeing. That's very common. Everybody knows guided imagery, really, but that does help strengthen that skill, believe it or not. I can't really speak to clairaudience because I don't teach that. But when it comes to the feeling part, the empathy part,
Hmm.
that's called clairsentience. One of the things, now this is just my opinion, there are many, many clairsentient intuitives out there. In fact, I think Judith Orloff's work is almost entirely about clairsentience. One of the things I've noticed about clairsentience is that it can be quite overwhelming for people. In other words, if you're out there feeling everybody's energy or everybody's emotion, it's going to overwhelm you. And one of the things I teach a lot of nurses, and one of the things that they regularly have to deal with is compassion fatigue, meaning they're working with people who are ill constantly, as are doctors, but they're right there in the front lines, the nurses, every day. And they can find their own empathy, their own compassion, just overloading. So when that happens from an energetic point of view, you want to have skills to really put up a buffer zone that doesn't stop you from being a compassionate, empathic person, but it stops you from, if you will, absorbing, so to speak, other people's energy that can really make you feel exhausted at the end of the day. Not just a difficult work day, but a difficult, energetic work day, so to speak. So there are skills and tools for that. I do teach those, actually. I have a workshop called Medical Intuition for Healing, and it's designed for people to work with their own energy using intuitive skills and tools so that they can have more balanced energy through their day. And it was designed it's really for everyone and anyone who works with the public, but even in your own life with your family and your friends and your daily life, it's very useful. So these are some of the things.
Especially if you already get those hunches, and especially if you're already open and empathic. I have patients from time to time who have a lot of anxiety. And I mean, they're really like at the end of their rope. And on occasion, I'll get this sense with them that, oh, they're actually very empathic. They don't recognize they're empathic. They're just wide open. They could use some filtering. They could use some shielding, actually, like Star Trek, like shields up. And I'll sometimes ask them, I'll just like look at them and I'll just go, are you kind of psychic?
I love it. Your practitioner looks at you and goes, "Are you psychic?"
Are you kind of psychic? I don't ask them if they're psychic. Are you kind of psychic? I hedge it a little. And more often than not, their eyes get kind of wide and they look and it's like, yeah, how did you know? Or maybe I am, right? They don't even want to admit it. Yeah, maybe I am. It's very interesting because I think that there are people out there, often on medication, or they've got some kind of a diagnosis of anxiety, and they're just these wide open people who probably use a little bit of help in like training a fantastic resource that they have.
I will ask people who are interested in this to go to the website. There are a series of guided meditations on the website. These are free for the public. They're short, they're about 5 minutes long, and I call them energy essentials, meaning these are some basic skills and tools to help you work with your own energy. And one of the tools is grounding, which is visualization of connecting your physical body to the earth, which is very helpful for humans. It's good for our energy, I think. The other skill is what you just said, shielding, buffering, boundaries, whatever you want to call it, from the energetic perspective. And there's some good tools in that audio. And let's see, the other one is releasing. We need to be able to energetically let go when things seem overwhelming. And so there's a tool for that as well. I would encourage people to do that. I put those up for my students because their clients and patients wanted this kind of information. And it's very simple to use and can be very effective. So people seem to very much like those.
That's great. I'll make sure that's on the show notes page.
Thank
So
you.
all y'all's listening right now, you can just go to the show notes page and we'll have access to that and whatever else that you might want to put up there. This leads me to actually, it's a personal question that I have. Maybe you can help me with this.
Sure.
I get hunches sometimes in the clinic. And some of it I think is because I've just spent time in the clinic, and some of it is maybe the kind of person that I am. Sometimes I've learned to sit quiet enough that other stuff comes in. I can kind of hear it or feel it or notice it. Sometimes I feel like I'm sitting with somebody, with one of my patients, and it is a little bit like I'm seeing into something. And I don't know if I'm supposed to be there. It seems really private. It seems
Yeah.
really personal.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm being invasive. So, my question is how to proceed with care and respect.
Such a good question. Ethics is what you're talking about. And I know as an acupuncturist, as a licensed professional, ethics are a major part of the process. Energy ethics are not very well understood. And one of my goals and my perspectives is that all practitioners of every kind, but certainly the unlicensed, certified ones, and working with energy, we must have good ethics. If we don't, we're overstepping, and that's not appropriate. So I teach a strong component of ethics. The issue with what you're talking about, or the point of what you're talking about from my perspective, is that a medical intuitive, I see the whole life story of the person. That's what there is contained in whatever physical imbalance is going on. And that information is incredibly helpful for the client because when we talk about it from the acupuncture point of view, it actually really works well because you are looking at the vital life force of the body, right? And looking at where the stagnation is or the blockages are. And that's beautiful. I think acupuncture does this. I mean, it's built on this foundation, and correct me if I'm wrong. With the medical intuitive, I'm also looking for that. And I'm also looking for the origins of it. So it's not just the physical origins, it's the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the life history origins. And yes, it is deeply personal. It is nothing but personal. So what do we do with that? Well, I train my students in how to language that ethically, responsibly, with care, and that's how it should be done, in my opinion. So, one of the things you might want to do, Michael, if you get those sorts of hits, is ask the patient if it's okay to say something. I'm getting a little hunch here. Do I have your permission? It looks like it might be. We all have to work within our scope of practice. And that becomes a challenge for licensed practitioners for sure. But I'm sort of casting around here because I really don't know how to answer the question
Mm.
other than to say we have to be mindful of that.
Yes. So this is great and this is helpful. I feel like as an acupuncturist, and because Chinese medicine does look at causes of illness coming from outside and causes
Yes,
coming from inside,
correct.
the Chinese for a long time have been very aware that emotional experiences can be a deep cause of illness or well-being for that matter.
Yes.
So that's within our scope of practice. That's in our
Wonderful.
That's totally in our ballywhack. And often we will ask people about their history. When did this thing start? What was your childhood like? Oh, you've had headaches since you were 7.
Hmm.
Wow. What was happening at 7?
Yes.
So we can have those conversations.
That's wonderful. So the difference between the practitioner asking the patient and medical intuition is that medical intuition does not need any information from the patient or client. We are looking and saying what we see or what we perceive based on whatever their energy is showing us, or medical intuitives work in many different ways. I work with the visual sense. And most of the time, the client doesn't even need to be there. I can still see it. And I don't need prompting from them. And frankly, it doesn't matter whether they prompt or not. So that's actually an important distinction for medical intuition. And if you look back into the literature and even in the anecdotal literature for years, Carolyn Mace and Edgar Casey being two very good examples of this, neither one of them needed information from the client. Neither one of them did any kind of health intake. And neither one of them wanted that. It was about information coming from them to the client. And that's how I operate as well. And that way, it kind of makes it more potent because it's not from the patient. Does that make sense? I'm not sure if I'm making myself clear.
I'm very cottoning to the word potent. And I've had teachers, I've practiced working this way in my clinic,
Mm.
where you first put your hands on people without any presupposition whatsoever. It's even better if you have no idea why they're there. You just invite them in, you put your hands on, you still yourself, you see what shows up.
Love it.
That is a very potent way to work because you're just a blank slate. There's no preconception. There's no, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It's empty.
Yeah.
You've got a blank canvas to work with.
Beautiful. I love that you're even speaking about this, Michael, because I know and I've understood in acupuncture, the world of acupuncture, there may not be room for that from some perspectives. But you're talking about ancient forms of healing that have been practiced for millennia by humans using intuitive senses.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. We need to have more understanding of this. We need to have more research. Western medicine loves an evidence base. Let's give it to them.
So, I mean, I could go on and on with the direction that we're going on this, and but maybe we can do that later. I would like to turn for the moment to some of that research. Tell us about the research that you recently did and how that came to be and why it matters.
Yeah. In my programs, it's a rigorous program in that the students learning to use these skills and they're tested on them, right? You need to make sure people can do it. And when I looked into the literature on medical intuition, I saw that there was very little. There's a long history, it reaches back to the 1700s on recorded instances of medical intuitive processes. But there hasn't been a whole lot of gold standard. In fact, there's been only one that I'm aware of 15 some years ago, and it's not very well known. And I thought to myself, okay, well, look, if I'm going to be teaching, as I am doing already, people from the medical world, there needs to be an evidence base here. So what I did was I put together, with some help of some friends down in San Diego at UCSD and other organizations, a survey for the accuracy, to measure the accuracy of my trained students. They've learned my method. It's a very specific method. Some of the problems in the prior research has been working with small cohorts and untrained and unvetted intuitives. And so the results have been all over the map and mostly inconclusive, even though there are some really interesting and intriguing data there. So what I did was I thought, it's time, let's do this. And we had 5 of my certified graduates. We had a cohort of 67 participants, and they came from all over the place. I had been teaching at the Cardiac Treatment Center at Scripps Health at Prebys Cardiovascular Institute in La Jolla, and that was one of the locations in San Diego where I had been teaching. And so we recruited patients from the Cardiac Treatment Center, and from UCSD, we recruited some of their patients who were interested in this whole thing. And we had 67 folks, which we thought was a really great number. It was lovely to have that many people. And what we did were blinded sessions, just as we've been talking. The medical intuitives we did no health intake. We never do anyway. And we were blinded to their issues. The way I teach is an eyes closed process, and that's actually quite deliberate. I don't want any visual cues from the client. I don't want any verbal we're going to hear, but because sometimes there's that. But there was nothing that the medical world would go, oh, you're picking up on subconscious visual cues. None of that. And we held these sessions, and I'm just looking at some of my stats here, mostly women, not surprising, 87% female, 13% male. Here's what we found. After the session, the participants rated the medical intuitive's accuracy on a scale of, I think it was 1 to 5, Likert scale, and they rated them as 94% accurate in the location and evaluation of their primary physical health issue. 94% accuracy. That's, I think, the highest accuracy of any of the medical intuitive research that's gone on in the past. I think that might be the highest. I'm not sure, but I think so.
You guys are like MIR or MRIs.
It's very similar to that. I'll give you that. Very similar. We're looking at the anatomy, the physiology, just like that. In many cases, in fact, how I teach is down to the cellular level, which is actually different than an MRI. We're looking at the cellular function, which is fascinating to look at. We can even look at DNA and epigenetic DNA as well. There's really no limit to what we can see in that respect. We found 100% accuracy, if you can believe that number, 100% accuracy in location and evaluation of a secondary health issue. Now, that wasn't 100% of subjects, that was 86% of subjects. Not everybody had a secondary issue that there was time to look at. So for those that we did look at, 100% accuracy was what was recorded. When it came to life experiences, that I was just talking about, looking into the life history, they rated the medical intuitives as 98% accurate in describing life experiences that are possible or probable. They rated them as 93% accurate in making a clear and obvious connection between that life experience and their current life health issue. That's an interesting number we can go back to, but we were happy to see that high number. One of the things we asked about, which we just threw this question in, but I'm glad we did. We asked if for those participants who had received a definitive medical diagnosis from their doctors, from their healthcare providers, how consistent was the medical intuitive in that consistency with that diagnosis? And they rated them as 94% consistent with a known diagnosis. Again, a blinded session. And there was a very high acceptance here. We saw that people were satisfied, 99% were satisfied, 97% would recommend medical intuition. They would have another session if given the opportunity. There was a lot of empowerment for them in the session. The feedback was very positive overall. So this is what we came up with. And these numbers kind of eclipsed anything that we had seen in the literature prior. And that study was written up, and it was just fairly recently, end of 2020, published in Journal of Alternative and Complementary Medicine. And it's been making some waves because this is the first published study on medical intuition like I said, in over 20 years. And granted, it's not a gold standard double-blinded situation. It certainly was a qualitative study, but it's a step forward. And one of the things that's come out of this is a study proposal for a gold standard study at UCSD through their School of Medicine. And we're looking for funding. That's a fundraising effort right now to bring this one to fruition. But we're ready to go as soon as we can get funding on this, because we want to show the value and efficacy of this skill in the way that Western medicine, allopathic medicine, can acknowledge.
Yes. Now, this study that you did already sounds quite blinded. How would this follow-up study,
It would be even more,
how would it be even more blinded? What would
yeah.
be the difference in the structure of that?
The limitations of this study was that it was a survey and it was qualitative. In other words, the participants were giving their thoughts and feelings and their impressions and experience. So what we would like to do is access medical records. That's really the double-blinded with a control group,
Mhm.
and test the medical intuitives that have been trained by me actually to be able to do this without any information, and we can corroborate it with participants' medical records. The life history part would have to be corroborated by the participant because we wouldn't have records on that. But the anatomical, physiological part certainly could be corroborated. And that would be the definitive gold standard way to test the skill set of visual intuition into the physical body, which is medical intuition. And we're all eager for that. To be totally honest, no one is sitting here going, "Hey, don't do that. We want to stay fuzzy and woo woo." Nobody wants that. It's the same thing that acupuncture, the same hurdles, in my opinion, acupuncture had to jump to become accepted by Western medicine. Would you agree with that, Michael? Maybe not.
Having a thriving, profitable practice is one of the most healing things you can do as a healthcare practitioner. Because a robust business is the ultimate expression of vital chi. And that's the heart of our medicine. I'm Julie Bairdontlock, and I help practitioners grow nourishing, profitable, authentic businesses that embody the generative cycle of Chinese medicine. This isn't about all yang all the time. It's about expanding your own internal capacity, growing collaborative relationships with your patients for ethical patient retention, and marketing as an extension of this medicine, not a necessary evil. You already know that everything is connected in your patients' lives and bodies. The same is true for your business. When we align your systems, your schedule, your pricing, and your offerings with you, we create flow, which means more spaciousness, more impact, and more joy. When you are in the flow, fully resourced in terms of chi, time, and money, your business becomes a source of healing, not just for your patients, but for you. Let's grow something rooted, radiant, and real. Visit lifeflowconsulting.com to learn more.
Well, a couple things. Number one, I had a patient the other day who said, "Yeah, I'm trying all these mainstream things, including acupuncture." And I was like, when did acupuncture become mainstream? So that was a little surprising to me. Just a note that we have made some kind of a jump.
That's huge.
So there's that. The thing for me, and often I take this just back to my own personal clinical experience because that's my job. I'm a clinician. I'm doing what I can with whatever tools I have to be helpful to my patients. And so sometimes I'll get those hunches or I'll get an idea or something even on occasion will like pop fully formed into my mind as to there's something going on here. And the question I ask myself is, am I making this up or is there something substantial to this?
Yes.
And so I think it's helpful as a practitioner to have ways of taking in information, however we take it in, and corroborating it to see if we're on track.
Yes.
The problem with asking patients is too often they're trying to be nice.
Hmm. Yeah, and it's not empirical information necessarily.
Mhm.
There's so much recorded evidence, although it's still considered anecdotal. People like Carolyn Mace, for example, she worked with a radiologist. It's a great story for a patient of the radiologist's, and her assessment of the physical body was actually corroborated by continued testing. And this is not unusual for medical intuitives to see what we see and then have the evidence base of the testing show up. I tell all of my clients to take the information to their doctor. Let their doctor do and or to their clinician, to their acupuncturist, whoever their providers are, and let those people do what they're supposed to do, and that is corroborate or not. That's the case. But that is over and over what we see in medical intuition is that it is a skill set that works so beautifully with the clinical world that it really, I see medical intuitives as part of the care team, someone that can assist, someone like you, Michael, assist medical MDs, assist by helping move things forward. So your intuitions, your gut hunches, your gut feelings can be developed if you choose to as a practitioner. You can develop those so you can do what I do. That's not a problem.
Well, the thing that's exciting for me about this,
Yeah.
number one, yes, if I can gain some more skills that help me to be helpful to my patients, great. If I can gain skills that then are corroborated with some of the fantastic technology
Yes.
that our modern medical world has, that corroborates that there's something there and it looks like this, and oh, yes, we're both seeing the same thing. I mean, that's nice and it's helpful. But the piece for me that is even more helpful, especially if you're doing some kind of energy medicine or if you're an acupuncturist or an herbalist, and you've got ways of seeing into how did that thing begin
Yeah.
and to be able to work with that, then we're getting to the root
Correct.
of what's going on. And we in Chinese medicine have this idea that for any issue, there's a root and a branch.
Mm.
And of course, there's things that you want to do to help alleviate the symptoms that are showing up at the branch. But until you've addressed the root,
Yeah. I'm with you 100%. That is the whole purpose and premise of medical intuition. Where did this start? Where did this start? And there's two ways to look at it. One is the physical, where did this start? The other is the everything else, the emotional, the mental, the spiritual, the life experience, the past life, if you go there, certainly, the epigenetics of it, the DNA, the genetics of it. There's so many wonderful places to look. And this is what the skill of medical intuition offers is that deep dive into the root cause that can shift the conversation, shift the trajectory of an issue, the patterns that are created by early life, for lack of a better word, traumatic life experience. And I'm not a psychologist, obviously, but it's easy to see, it's easy to understand. And certainly there's plenty of research now that shows that early life trauma can create later life health imbalances. That's fairly new science. Psychoneuroimmunology, again, how the mind and the body affect each other. Certainly, acupuncture and Chinese medicine has been looking at it from this perspective for thousands of years. And Western medicine, in my opinion, is catching up as how medical intuitives have looked at it for thousands of years. So it's funny to see the synthesis now of these two very different perspectives starting to come together. And it's a very exciting time.
yes, I think synthesis is a great description of these different traditions coming together.
Yeah.
We have tremendous opportunity at this moment
Yes.
because we can use the fantastic imaging and we can look inside of people's blood,
Yes.
all kinds of ways that our modern Western mind can be opened to other possibilities. Why? Because, well, the test over here says it's so. And so maybe all these other things that I didn't want to think about, I can start to think about.
What's really is absolutely right. And I have to really hand it to the folks who are promoting and bringing forth this concept of integrative medicine. That's the medical world acknowledging and recognizing and wanting to support acupuncture and other complementary and alternative practices. And medical intuition is right there. I'm very blessed to be accepted and welcomed into that community and my studies and my research in this particular skill because it fits. It fits. What was I going to say about this? The other wonderful thing that medical intuition can offer is actually being able to perceive health information and wellness information that actually isn't yet in the public eye. For example, 15, 20 years ago, when I was starting out as a medical intuitive, I've been in practice for over 20 years, I saw SIBO, right? Small intestinal bowel overgrowth, gut health issues. I didn't have the words, the medical words for it, but I could see what was going on. And I could empower clients to take this information to their doctors when they weren't getting help. Issues like Lyme disease, issues like chronic fatigue, fibromyalgia, things that are more understood now, where 10, 15, 20 years ago, they were still considered very fringy or unknown or whatever. I know in Chinese medicine there's so much information here, but when you talk about Western medicine, it was a big blind spot, right?
Yeah.
So much of this. So medical intuition and these wonderful practices such as acupuncture, I mean, I have deep, deep respect for it, this ancient method. These address it in ways that may not be understood yet. And we have just so much information about how this works in research, in scientific research, that medical intuitives are actually pushing the boundaries here.
Hmm.
So it's fascinating.
Yes. So I've got a question,
Yes.
a bit provocative. So 10, 15 years ago, you were seeing something that now we call it SIBO, but you were already picking up there's something going on with the intestines of some people, that there's this bacterial overgrowth. This is something you were already cottoning to 15 years ago. Yes?
Yes. Hmm.
With that in mind, and given the very strange year that we've been living through with COVID,
Yeah.
what are you seeing
In the present,
in the present? Let's stay with the present for the moment.
well, I see a lot of fear. There's just massive amounts of fear, and understandably so. One of the things and I tell my clients is watch your own energy when it comes to this level of fear out there. Keep yourself grounded, keep yourself as neutral emotionally as you can. Don't get caught up in a lot of the stuff swirling around. Do your research as you need to and trust your intuition. I know that sounds a little glib, but it's not. It's where I operate. So,
Mhm. Well, the fear is profound.
yeah.
I have patients who have had 2 shots, they still wear 2 masks, they're afraid to go anywhere.
Mhm.
So I look at that and go, "Wow, that is a heavy dose. That's a very, very heavy dose of fear."
Yes.
In terms of the virus itself,
Mm.
because there's so many questions about it, and there's these variants and vaccinations, do they help? Can people still spread it? I mean, it seems like we have as many questions now as we did a year ago. Have you got any light to shine on that?
One of the things that I do not do are prognoses.
Mhm.
Because it's outside of my scope of practice, number 1, it's unethical for me to do so. But let me just say that when all this started a year ago, I wanted to find out from this virus what its purpose was. And that is something that I like to do is talk to things, issues in that way and really have a conversation with them. And one of the things, probably the primary information that this virus expressed was that we have been living on this planet as separate countries, separate cultures, separate individual, shielded, cut off from humanity, from each other. And that's been the nature of this human experience on planet Earth for a very, very, very long time. One of the messages of this virus is that, well, from what I saw, is that it's time for humans to understand we live on one planet. We are a global species. Doesn't matter the color of our skin or our nationality, we are one species. And we need to act like it. We need to understand how connected we are. So it was a very spiritual message, you could say, but it was also extremely practical because if we don't, this is what can happen. The idea of global warming, that's not a new conversation. That's been going on for a long time, but it doesn't hit us where we live. A pandemic, a virus has been hitting the whole planet in a very personal way. It's a different kind of experience. And that's what it had to say to me. I can't speak for anyone else. This might not sound like anything reasonable or logical to anyone, but that was the information I got for what it's worth.
I remember when it was about a year ago, as we're having this conversation, when all the lockdowns were happening and there were all these questions about supply chains. And we began to notice how incredibly interconnected our world is.
Mhm.
Well, how come we can't get this in our country? Well, because this stuff is made in various countries. Yeah, but we have these nations, these lines on the map, and these tribes that we belong to. But in terms of where our food comes from, in terms of where our medicine comes from, in terms of anything that you're using in your day-to-day life, we're using computers right now to have this conversation. Those components come from all over the world.
Mhm. Think about it this way too, the idea of interconnectedness. As a Chinese medicine practitioner and for me as a medical intuitive, what we are dealing with and working with is the connection, the interconnectedness of not just the physical body, but the energy body as well. and the connections between the two and the life history and the whole nine yards. So when we think about physical or emotional or spiritual or wellness per se, we look at it from the point of view of interconnectedness, right? Am I correct about that?
Spot on.
Yeah. This is like the outer manifestation of the imbalance in the interconnectedness of our planet. How about that? Right? There it is. You can't deny it. Supply chains, communications, health and healing and wellness, getting it to the right areas. I mean, come on. It's one big, enormous, and very powerful metaphor if you look at it from that perspective.
Well, so often with healing, part of the process of healing is we have a mirror held up to ourselves, or we help hold a mirror up to our patients
Hmm.
so we can see clearly.
Beautiful.
Don't always like what we see.
Mm, yeah, that's right. And especially when there's an imbalance, suffering, where is that coming from? What do we need to know to help move that along, to help move ourselves forward, to move towards wellness? What do we need to know? That's a huge part. That's probably the part. That's the most potent part, important part of medical intuition. What do I need to know? That's what clients are asking when they come for a session. What do I need to know? What's missing, right?
People are asking that too when they come for acupuncture. I think they're asking that when they go for any diagnosis. I've had so many patients who they just want to know what is going on. I have actually had people say to me, I don't care if what I have is cancer. I just want to know what it is.
Yeah, it's incredibly empowering. Now, as a medical intuitive who's not a licensed practitioner, I do not diagnose. What I'm looking at is the symptomology, I'm looking at the visuals, and that is what they would take to you. And you could create a diagnosis based on that information. Again, all of it is empowering for the client or patient. And that's the whole point. One of the biggest problems we find with traditional allopathic medicine, conventional medicine, is the disempowering nature of it for people. And I'm not here to diss allopathic medicine. I think it's deeply important. We need it all. But the system is disempowering for, I hear, certainly from clients, it can feel that way. Does that resonate? I don't want to.
It very much resonates.
Yeah.
And I think as an acupuncturist, I stand and my colleagues listening to this, we stand in this kind of gray zone. There are areas where we diagnose that's within our wheelhouse. There's areas of diagnosing like cancer. We don't diagnose cancer. We send people to the Western medicine system and oncologists. That's their ballywhack. That's their scope of practice.
Correct.
Our job is when we notice something and go, something is really not fitting here and something has my concern. Very important to get people to the right place where they can get that information. So, yes, we all play a role here, just like all the organs of the body
Hmm.
are necessary for proper healthy functioning of a human being, any being for that matter.
Yeah.
The various parts of our medical system are all necessary
Yeah.
to do what they do best
Yeah.
and what they're designed for.
Absolutely. I'm 100% with you. One of the key perspectives that I teach is that a bias is a blinder.
Mm,
And if you have a bias, no matter what your field of study is, if you're looking through a tunnel, a lens, so to speak, you might miss something. Medical intuition really stands alone, in my opinion, in that if it's practiced correctly, again, in my opinion, there's a lack of bias there. And not coming from a medical background, for me, is actually a bit of an advantage because I don't have a knowledge base that you would have. So therefore, I'm not even going to lean on that knowledge base. And I can see things that a doctor might not look for, or even an acupuncturist might not look
of
for.
course.
That's why it becomes such a great adjunct and support system to licensed healthcare professional. And again, back to where I was with medical intuitives being a support system and a part of a healthcare team because it works so well that way.
Yeah.
This is full spectrum healthcare, isn't it? Whole person healthcare, whatever you want to call it. Whatever the system is, medical intuition seems to be able to assist and support and enhance those systems.
And if you happen to be a doctor or a practitioner, it can give you some extra skills
Oh, yeah.
that are very useful in your day-to-day practice.
I'm always thrilled when I get someone from the allopathic field coming through the program, and then they have medical doctors are coming through the program. Along with acupuncturists and people who are more based in the complementary, so to speak, or the energetic perspective. But it's a real paradigm shift from traditional ways of dealing with the body and the mind and the spirit. It's just a paradigm shift. And I think it's pretty great. And I think it is contributing to the future of healthcare in a very powerful way.
One of my teachers would often talk to us when I was in school about how you can use your diagnostic methods to get a snapshot of who somebody is, and that will give you some information, and you can be helpful to some degree. But if you can get the movie of their life,
I love it.
you can be much more helpful.
So who said that to you?
One of my teachers, an acupuncturist teacher.
Did your teacher tell you how to get the movie of their life? Because that's what we do. We look at literally a movie. I mean, not literally, but it looks like a movie of someone's life, points in time.
So he did not teach us to look at the movie. Here's what he did. There's some methods that he does teach, and he would give us the first steps
Ah.
of using those methods. And if you could pick up what he was teaching, he would show you the next piece.
Oh, wow. Oh, he was mentoring.
He's a very generous person. If he couldn't get through A, then he couldn't teach you B. It's not that he didn't want to teach you B,
Uh-huh.
but you have to get A before you can do B.
How far did you get in the alphabet?
I'm still working on it. I'm somewhere in the middle.
Well, I will tell you that resonates with me deeply because it is the nature of medical intuition, is looking at the life story, looking at the quote movie of someone's life to see where these points in time are. And they're not always big, heavy, traumatic moments. Very often they are small moments that set up some sort of energetic fluctuation or disturbance or imbalance that becomes a pattern of imbalance that becomes potentially physical manifestation. And that's where it's just fascinating to look at, endlessly fascinating. You could learn. Anyone can learn this.
This is interesting. It's not necessarily the big trauma.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking of some study I've done with some osteopathic techniques like cranial sacral work. If you just grab someone's head and you kind of wrench it, you're actually probably not going to do much damage. But if you touch very gently in a way that's not helpful, you can cause a lot of problems.
Oh, interesting.
So there is this idea, at least in that tradition, and I think it's true in acupuncture as well. We're using very gentle, subtle,
Mm-hmm.
hardly any input at all, especially if you're doing Japanese acupuncture.
Mm.
Very, very gentle interaction with the system, and yet you can have very profound effects.
Mm-hmm.
And so I appreciate your reminder here that while the big things are easy to look at and they're easy to focus on, there might be some smaller things that are worth our attention.
Absolutely. Yes. Beautifully said.
Okay, great. So if people are interested in contacting you or they want to listen to those audios that you were talking about earlier in our conversation or learn more about the work you do, how do they find you?
Yes. So my website is thepracticalpath.com. 3 words all put together, thepracticalpath.com. And on there, you'll find the workshop we mentioned, the guided meditations we talked about, and also the main program. And the main program is a 9-month program in 2 parts. There's a level 1 and a level 2. I teach it twice a year in spring and fall. I teach it live online via Zoom, so people can join us from all over the world, which is lovely, and they do, and all over the country. And it is designed for wellness practitioners. It's not for the public or lay people. It is for people who are already working in wellness care of some sort. And there's information on the FAQ page about who qualifies and all that. But certainly, acupuncturists and Chinese medicine practitioners are welcome. There is continuing education for Chinese medicine practitioners through the NCCAOM. The programs are also accredited for nurses and for wellness coaches. And it's just been wonderful. It's just been the joy of my life to teach people how to do this and begin to incorporate it into their practices. And as far as I can see, Michael, this is the shift. This is the time for the shift on the planet in healthcare for incorporating these more energy-based practices into the public awareness. And the more we do, the more people can heal on all of these levels.
That makes sense. And I live in St. Louis, Missouri.
Mm.
And like I said, I had a patient come in the other day and say, yeah, I'm using mainstream stuff like acupuncture. So yes, things have shifted so much over the past 15, 20 years. And I think we're living in a very dynamic moment. I actually tend to be optimistic, even with all the so-called troubles we have out there. I think there are a commensurate amount of resources. It's up to us to take advantage of them.
I'm hugely optimistic. Why not? There's so much value. When I started out 20 years ago, as you said, doctors would call me in a hush hush way. Will you take a look at this for my patients? That kind of thing. And I'm like, great. Hey, would you like me to come into your clinic? Oh, no, 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 no.
No way, no.
It was very clandestine. And when I speak at integrative health conferences and wellness conferences, the MDs are, that's like, this is wherever their comfort zone is. Complementary alternative, we're already there, right? You're already there. This is the tradition you come from. But they come up to me and they tell me their stories of intuitive insights with their clients and their patients rather. And it's like, used to be furtive whispering. And now they're like, oh, I heard your talk and here's what's happened for me. And I'm like, great. People are losing their fear of discussing this. And that's great. That's a great sign. I think the people are more ready for this now than ever before. Of course, there are plenty of hurdles to jump, but in our work, I can say that, for all of us here on the complementary alternative side, our job is just to keep showing the validity and the value.
As a good friend of mine likes to say, judge by the clinical results you get. And really, if people get good results and they get help,
Mm-hmm.
they're down with it.
Yeah.
And they're going to tell all their friends.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
That's it.
Wendie, I so thoroughly enjoyed our conversation today. Thank you so much for making the time.
Michael, it's been such a pleasure. And I really appreciate you having me on here. And thank you.
Our Chinese medicine methods give us the ability to see both health and illness in ways that conventional medicine does not. So it makes sense to me that there are other methods and practices that would allow us to use our sensorium to perceive both illness as well as the resources that can be brought into play to heal us. For me, the intuitive faculty is another one of those quiet, perceptive practices that invites us to be still enough so that we can listen more deeply to our patients. I hope that you have enjoyed this conversation with Wendie, and do check out the show notes page for more resources. This winds it up for today, other than to remind you that we are now accepting material for the fall edition of the audio journal. Visit the website and tell us what you'd like to share. All right, friends, see you again next week for another geologically thought-provoking conversation. Well, here we are at the end of this episode. If you've listened up to this point, you're either a rabid fan of Geological or the forward button on your podcast player stopped working. If you are indeed a fan of the podcast, you can help us to bring new episodes to our community of practitioners by supporting us with a membership or a one-time contribution. Details, of course, are on the website. That's it for today, friends. Join us again next Tuesday for another thoughtful episode of Geological.